Welcome back to another episode of Liberty Lounge. I'm here tonight with our two guests. Matt unfortunately couldn't be here tonight, but want to thank you, Scott. We have Scott Carlson, former Morris County Democrat Executive Director. And then to my right is former mayor and current committee member of Morris Township, Jeff Grayzel. Guys, thank you for being here with me tonight.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, great being here.
Yeah, and so I'm like the Roman surrounded by two Greeks, so this should be interesting. I know it's been a while since we've been on, but first I wanted to share an update about the Parsippany DPW worker who yesterday was struck by a car. He is actually recovering, and we're going to continue to pray for him. And the GoFundMe has raised over $40,000. I don't know if you saw that story. So, really good example of the community coming together. But, tonight we wanted to talk about, there have been some big developments since the last time we were live. We officially know how the special election in Seat 11 ended with Congresswoman Mejia, who will now represent us until at least June, and then there's the primary again, and then the general election in November. So for there, I'd love to get both your thoughts on what happened, and we'll talk about her first bill.
Well, from Jeff and I's perspective, as people that have been doing Morris County politics for quite some time, it's still shocking for me to see the seat that's was always occupied by a Frelinghuysen, now occupied by a Democratic Socialist. What a shift that's been.
Yeah, and from my perspective, and just for the record, she's going to be our congresswoman until January. So she's filling out the term of Mikey Sherrill, and then whoever wins in June and then November will take over in January of 2027.
Okay.
So just to clear the record, I was one of the candidates
Yep.
in that special election and sat with her on the debate stage. And I think we've seen the results of gerrymandering that's been happening all over the country, in New Jersey as well. And we ended up in what has always been a sort of like moderate or conservative district, right? Even from a Democratic perspective, it's moderate Democrats that live here. We have a Democratic Socialist that's now in the seat.
Yeah. So, this is a question that I'm hearing from my friends on the left. What is the future of the Democratic Party? I have said, and I continue to think that the elections, and I predicted this before the outcome, that democratic socialism is the energy. It's the fuel now in the primaries, which are really important. And we'll get back to gerrymandering because this comes on the heels of the Supreme Court decision, Calais versus Louisiana. And that was a 6-3 decision. But my question to you is, do you think Democratic Socialist candidates are now going to be the type to expect going forward?
Well, it certainly appears to be that the case. Yeah, you've seen it whether it's New York City or right here in Morris County. It seems that the Democratic Socialists are the ones that seem to be having all the success amongst the party these days, and it seems the voters are okay with that.
Yeah, I know somebody who calls them the Blue MAGAs. MAGA had a formula that worked the last, four. You can go back to 2016, however far back you want to go. And the Democratic Socialists have figured out this Blue MAGA formula.
Now, how do you both feel about that?
I don't think it represents this district, doesn't represent me. So I'm disappointed. But that's the way the system is set up. And I have some ideas we'll talk about later about how to fix it. But yeah, we got.
Sure, I've always considered myself a moderate Democrat, and this is, for me, sometimes it appears to be a little too much too soon. That said, I do appreciate the goals and the aims and universal health care, things of that sort. They're ambitious, but I do appreciate them.
Well, I mean, look, we can be ambitious, but you can be ambitiously wrong. And, from my perspective, so I knew this district when Rodney was Rodney Frelinghuysen, because that was the family's ancestral seat. And then we went to Mikey Sherrill, who was, I would define as a moderate Democrat.
Yeah.
But Mejia is way to the far left of Governor Sherrill. And to your point, I think it's going to put a lot of Democrats in between a rock and a hard place because, just like with Republicans in areas where you have traditional Republicans that might not define themselves as MAGA, but they have to own what people in DC at the federal level are doing. And it's going to be interesting to see where that intersection of how moderate Democrats respond to democratic socialists that are starting to now step on the stage.
Mm-hmm. Yep. One thing I said on the campaign trail is that the reason why we have the situation that we're in with the right and the left being pulled so far to the extremes is that government hasn't delivered for us. I think on both sides of the aisle.
Mhm.
And you just said Democrats,
Well-
not sure what they stand for, and I think that's been a problem for 4 years.
What do you think the left and the I'm interested. What do you think hasn't been delivered on for people?
What have we accomplished in this country? I think this past Congress has had the least amount of legislation ever of Congress, and every year it goes down and down and down.
Mhm.
They literally are getting nothing done. If you just look at the bills that are being passed in Washington, it's less and less every single year. So they're not doing anything.
And we had a conversation, Mayor Tim Doherty and I of Morris Town, and we both said it's probably because they don't do this. How hard is it to get people to sit down? Now, we probably disagree on a lot, but I like to think we agree on more than we disagree. But I've spoken to a few people that I know in DC, and I asked them the same question. How often do you find people from different caucuses of Republican and Democrats sitting down? And that number has plummeted of people
Very
who
much
sit
so.
down because, and I think to your point, gerrymandering has made it so that primaries are truly the general elections. And I think as more and more districts become just carved out to one party or the other, you're going to have fewer voices in the middle. I think something like out of the 435 I think 80% are safe seats, and that number is probably only going to get more as you now have, you had Virginia that successfully passed its referendum, and then Florida with Governor DeSantis announcing he's going to add 4 seats. So I think that we're going to be in this tit for tat where each party is just going to continue to create more districts that only represent the primary voters of that district. Do you think that's fair, or am I off base on that?
And you're increasing the divide between the two parties as you do that. And we're going to end up with a greater schism between the two parties, which, back to your original point, it's great to sit down with you and talk about whether it's life here in Parsippany or what's going on in Washington, D.C., and try to exchange ideas civilly, try to tone down the rhetoric a little bit.
Yeah, and I'll toot the horn
Go
of
ahead.
Morris Township a little bit. We've been successful for years and years and years under Republican control and now under Democratic control. And that's because we put politics, when we walk in the meeting room, we put politics aside and we focus on what needs to get done. And when the meeting's over, we have this great tradition that we all go out and have a beer and dinner together after every meeting.
Wow.
And so when I became the first Democrat on the council since Watergate in 2007, they invited me along, and I was really appreciative of that. And we talked baseball and other stuff, not, no council business,
Yeah,
right, when we're
yeah.
out, but establishes that bond, and it attaches you as human beings, and you understand that you're really after the same things. And that is completely missing right now
Yeah.
in politics.
And I think that's a pretty simple thing, but has a lot of, politics is all relationship.
Of course.
And in my business and sales, there's a saying that the difference between a contact and a signed contract is the R, and the R is the relationship. And I think that same principle applies to politics. One of the learning lessons that I probably, had to undergo was that, sometimes there's this, theory that, a horse on its own can pull 8,000 pounds alone, but 2 horses together can do 19,000 pounds together. And I think that's probably something I didn't learn, but I respect that you have that tradition. Does that continue to this day?
Yeah, it continues to this day. Yeah.
So what do you think we need to do to get back to getting things done. What does that look like to you?
Well, I think the gerrymandering has pulled us apart, and like we talked about, made every election more extreme because the people who vote in the primaries, where the elections are done now, it's almost like the general election doesn't matter anymore. Elections are won in the primary, and the dedicated party voters on either side are the ones who are electing those representatives, and they tend to be the extremists that come out and vote. So the silent majority in the middle is not having a say anymore in our politics because it's decided at the primary level. That's a big problem, I see.
And we can get back there. I'm sure, I cut my teeth in the New Jersey Senate in the late 90s, early 2000s, working for a Democratic state senator. And if we were introducing a piece of legislation, the first thing I did was went to the right side of the Senate well to find a Republican co-sponsor. And I don't know what's happened, but you never see bipartisan bills anymore. I think it seems to be forbidden on some level to even interact with the other party in any meaningful way. But as Jeff said, just getting around the table for a meal and a beer goes a very long way to trying to heal that.
Yeah. Well, and I am totally for civility and bipartisanship where it's possible. Now, people on the right in New Jersey will say that, well, look, it's been 23 years of one-party control in the legislature. I think since 2002, the Democrats have controlled the state Senate and the Assembly, and with the exception of 8 years of Governor Christie, it's been essentially one-party rule.
Sure.
So of 23 years of one-party rule has brought a state that has the highest taxes, that has now, unfortunately, some of the most expensive utilities, at least in the north or northeast region. And I read a study where people in their 30s are like half of all 30-year-old couples are still living at home because they can't afford to buy a house. At least in New Jersey, in Parsippany, the median household price now is $550,000, which starts off with a mortgage payment of almost $3,500 to $4,000. So when does it become fair for us on the right to say that Democrats have made the state unaffordable?
Yeah, I don't disagree. It's a very unaffordable state. Part of that problem, we can go way back to Christine Todd Whitman when she refused to pay into the pension system and put us behind the 8 ball in terms of funding state pensions, which are, people have been working at those jobs for long times and relying on those pensions is not fully funded. The last, I think, 3 years, they made a full pension payment. And to do that, drives up the budget and raises taxes. And it's unfortunate. It's like been a snowball, I think, over the years. And we're at a precipice now. And a lot of people say, Mikey Sherrill's got a lot of work to do, and she better fix it, or else this state is in real trouble if we can't turn this thing around.
A lot of that's driven by home rule as well. You look at other states, they've got county school systems, county police departments, and we've got, 563 municipalities here?
More than California.
Yeah. 563 municipalities, each with their own school board, each with their own police squad, et cetera, et cetera. New Jersey is going to remain unaffordable under whether it's Republican or Democratic control, as long as we continue to embrace home rule as we do. Yeah.
Do you think the incentive model has, I think the last time a municipality consolidated was Princeton and Princeton Borough, and I think that was over 10 years ago or something. What do the conversations look like about forcing towns to consolidate?
We're going to have that conversation, I think.
Yeah, we had an example just recently. Mendham Township and Mendham Borough had talks about possibly merging because Mendham Township needed a new police station and they needed a refurbished town hall. And instead of investing in that, there were talks about merging with Mendham Borough and bringing them together so they wouldn't have to invest in these duplicative infrastructure projects. And they said, no, we're going to stay the way it is.
Isn't that amazing?
It's amazing.
So, that's why I sometimes say to my friends on the right that if taxes were the most important issue in New Jersey, even though people say it is, this would be the most Republican state in the country.
Yeah.
But it's not.
Yeah, but
There-
those two towns are Republican, right? And I'm
Sure.
not trying to say
Yeah.
it's a Democratic versus Republican issue. It's a home rule issue.
Yeah,
like,
home rule
like
issue.
Scott said. But even two Republicans towns when
Did
it
not
would've-
wanna consolidate.
when it would have lowered taxes, they decided not to consolidate.
And I think, I heard, where I heard former Governor Chris Christie basically say that New Jersey is a state where people like paying for things, and that kind of goes into his point, is that people want to have their own community center, their own library, but it is the detriment of that is it's continually forcing taxes and prices to increase, and it's keeping out, at least in my generation, a whole host of people that are never going to be able to own a home. And because I don't know how you feel about affordable housing, but I don't think having an apartment fulfills that. You can't raise at least I don't believe you can raise a family in an apartment. They're going up everywhere. I'm sure you're getting killed by Mount Laurel, but that's the only option people in my generation have,
Right.
which is sad.
Yeah, it's really sad. Yep. No new single family homes hardly anywhere, unless they're big mansions.
Well, and I think that's where we need to look at where can we get government out of the picture, and that is reducing the power of zoning and planning boards, which make it so onerous to even build a home. I'll give you an example. When I first got elected to Parsippany Council, I had a constituent who needed help dealing with the NJDEP because they wanted to put on an addition, and that was within the zone of the wetlands.
Yes.
And by the time I left Parsippany Council, which was 4 years later, he still did not get approval from the NJDEP. Now, this was an addition that would have paid more taxes to the town, would have allowed his in-laws to live there, and it took 4 years, and we didn't even get it done.
Yeah. Well, wetlands regulations are very, very difficult to navigate. But again, that's the state of New Jersey. It's what you were saying as far as the planning and zoning boards go, trying to give them a little
Like,
less.
what can we do to give homeowners the ability to make it easier to add on additions in their properties, things that can demonstrably lower the cost of housing.
Some years ago, I mean, here in Parsippany, we threw the master plan for the town out and rewrote a new one with the goal of.
I don't think we followed that at all.
I doubt. But zoning can be a great tool. It seems to me now, particularly with your generation, if I may, that families are looking for smaller homes and not what they call the boomer homes.
You say that, but when I drive around town, every smaller home is being replaced by a larger new home that's going like right to the setback. Everything is
Yes.
right to the limit.
Particularly if you go to the lake properties.
Yeah, you go to Lake Hiawatha, you go to Lake Parsippany, they're
Sure.
knocking down. People are buying a $700,000 home to put up $1 million home,
Right.
and it's crazy.
And why the town is granting variances for that is just completely beyond me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what to say to that.
Right.
Being a zoning attorney, I believe in strongly that you need to uphold the zoning that's put in place by the mayor and council. Variances should be rarely granted, particularly use variances, particularly setback variances, if you want to try to keep the composition of the neighborhood uniform.
Mm-hmm. But do you think it's time that we reevaluate to what degree those powers are preventing multifamily or new homes from being built that can give new single family home stock, put it into the market?
Not following, I'm sorry.
What I mean is, like, do you think we should look at what regulations are inhibiting new single family homes from being built?
Any chance you have to reduce regulation, you should take that opportunity.
Do you think Governor Sherrill is going to move in that direction of reducing regulation?
Well, we do have regulation for a reason, and
Sure.
if there's a valid reason to regulate, then by all means keep the regulation in place. But over-regulation is obviously a terrible thing.
Would you
And,
say New Jersey is an overregulated state or an underregulated state?
I think it's just about right, to be honest. And the reason we have far more regulation is because we're so populous and dense
Mm-hmm.
that more regulation is required in order to manage that.
Yep, but getting back to your point about affordable homes for your generation and the
Yeah.
next generation, it's an issue of not having enough land. New Jersey is the densest state in the country. Not only do we have the most school districts,